The fluorescent lights of St. Jude's Metropolitan Emergency Department did not hum. They buzzed with a low, electric anxiety that seemed to vibrate in the teeth of everyone who worked there. It was 3 in the morning on a Tuesday, the hour when the city's adrenaline crashed, and its consequences arrived in ambulances with sirens wailing like wounded animals. The waiting room was a mosaic of human suffering, a teenager clutching a swollen ankle, an elderly woman breathing in shallow, rattling gasps, and a man in a business suit holding a towel to a bleeding forehead, his eyes wide with the shock of sudden violence. In the center of this controlled chaos stood Alina Vance. To the casual observer, she was invisible. She wore the standard-issue navy scrubs that had been washed so many times they had lost their crispness, fading into the background like beige wallpaper. Her hair was pulled back into a severe utilitarian bun that offered no distraction, no flair, no personality. She moved with a quiet efficiency, checking vitals, adjusting IV lines, documenting intake forms with a pen that looked as worn as her shoes. She was 34 years old, but in the hierarchy of St. Jude's, she occupied a space that felt ageless and subordinate. She was a triage nurse, the gatekeeper, the filter, the person whose job it was to decide who mattered enough to see a doctor first and who could wait. And tonight, like every night, the doctors looked through her. Dr. Marcus Thorne did not look through Alina. He looked past her, as if she were a piece of furniture that had been misplaced in his domain. Thorne was the attending physician for the night shift, a man whose reputation was built less on medical brilliance and more on the volume of his voice and the sharpness of his tongue. He was 45, with silver-streaked hair that he styled with meticulous care even at 3 in the morning, and a demeanor that suggested he believed the hospital existed solely to facilitate his career advancement. He walked with a stride that demanded the corridor clear before him, his white coat billowing like a cape. When he spoke to Alina, it was rarely with eye contact. It was usually a bark of instruction, a correction of a minor clerical error, or a sigh of exasperation when she dared to suggest a prioritization that differed from his own. Tonight, the tension in the ER was palpable, a thick fog of fatigue and impending disaster. The staffing levels were critically low. 2 nurses had called in sick, and the resident physicians were overwhelmed by a surge of flu cases that had flooded the pediatric wing. Alina was running on 4 hours of sleep, her feet throbbing in shoes that had seen better days, but her mind was sharp, alert, scanning the room with a predator's focus. She saw things others missed. She saw the slight tremor in the hand of the businessman with the head wound, a tremor that didn't match the concussion profile. She saw the pale, clammy skin of the elderly woman in corner 3, a sign of shock that hadn't yet registered on the monitors because the sensors were old and sluggish. She saw the patterns. But seeing them was not the same as being allowed to act on them. If you are enjoying this story of hidden strength and quiet resilience, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps us bring more narratives of justice and competence to your screen. Your support means the world to our community of storytellers. Alina had been at St. Jude's for 5 years. 5 years of being called just a nurse. 5 years of having her suggestions dismissed as overstepping. 5 years of swallowing her pride because she needed the insurance, because she needed the stability, because she had made a promise to herself long ago that she would never let her ego interfere with her duty. But there was a weight to her silence that few understood. It was not the silence of submission, it was the silence of containment. Like a dam holding back a river, her restraint was active, muscular, and exhausting. She remembered the day she had been hired. The interview had been brief, perfunctory. The hiring manager, a tired administrator named Gary, had glanced at her resume and frowned. "You have a gap here," he had said, tapping a 3-year period where no employment was listed. "What were you doing?" Alina had smiled, a small, tight expression. "Personal matters," she had said. "Family obligations." Gary had shrugged, marked the box, and moved on. He didn't know that those 3 years had been spent in a field hospital in a conflict zone halfway across the world, where resources were scarce, lights were non-existent, and decisions meant life or death in seconds. He didn't know that Alina Vance had once triaged a battalion under mortar fire. He didn't know that she had performed emergency surgeries with nothing but a flashlight and a pocket knife. To him, she was a gap in employment. To the world, she was ordinary, but ordinary people do not carry the stillness of someone who has watched the light leave 100 pairs of eyes. Ordinary people do not flinch at the sound of a gurney wheel squeaking, because it sounds too much like a scream. Alina carried her history in the set of her shoulders, in the way she checked her pockets for tools that weren't there, in the way she listened to the silence between heartbeats. The social hierarchy of the ER was rigid and unyielding. At the top were the attendings, gods in white coats who held the power of diagnosis and discharge. Below them were the residents, eager and anxious, trying to prove their worth. Then came the specialists, the radiologists, the surgeons, each in their own fiefdom. And at the bottom, the foundation upon which the entire structure rested, were the nurses. Specifically, the triage nurses. They were the shock absorbers. They took the anger of the patients, the impatience of the families, and the indifference of the administration. Alina accepted this role with a grace that infuriated Dr. Thorne. He wanted resistance. He wanted someone to argue with, someone to dominate, because it validated his sense of superiority. But Alina gave him nothing. She was polite, she was precise, she was invisible, and that invisibility was her armor. It allowed her to observe. It allowed her to learn the rhythms of the hospital, the weaknesses in the protocol, the shortcuts the doctors took when they were tired. She knew which medication carts were missing supplies. She knew which monitors gave false readings when the battery was low. She knew that Dr. Thorne often skipped the secondary survey in trauma cases because he was too busy thinking about his golf game. These were not accusations she voiced. They were facts she stored. Facts are dangerous things in the wrong hands, but in Alina's hands, they were simply tools. Tools she hoped she would never have to use. We are just beginning to uncover the depth of Alina's past. If you want to stay with us for the reveal, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. We release new stories every week that challenge perceptions and celebrate unsung heroes. The first crack in the night's fragile order appeared at 3:14 a.m. The automatic doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss, and two paramedics rushed in, pushing a gurney that seemed to vibrate with urgency. On it lay a young man, no older than 20, his face gray, his chest rising in rapid, shallow jerks. Male, 22, sudden onset chest pain, diaphoretic, BP 80/50, the lead paramedic shouted, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. He collapsed at a gym. No prior history. Dr. Thorne looked up from his computer, his eyebrows raising in mild annoyance. Another panic attack, he muttered, loud enough for Alina to hear. Put him in Bay 4, get an EKG, probably just dehydrated. Alina stepped forward, her eyes locked on the patient. She didn't look at his face, she looked at his neck. She saw the distension of the jugular vein, a subtle bulge that signaled pressure building in the chest. She heard the faint, wet crackle in his lungs, a sound like crumpling cellophane. This was not a panic attack. This was not dehydration. This was a tension pneumothorax or perhaps a cardiac tamponade. His heart was being crushed, either by air or fluid, and he was minutes away from arrest. Dr. Thorne, Alina said, her voice calm but firm. His breath sounds are absent on the left. He's tachycardic. I think we need a chest X-ray immediately and possibly a needle decompression. Thorne stopped typing. He turned slowly, fixing her with a glare that could freeze water. Nurse Vance, he said, drawing out her title with sarcastic precision. I am the doctor. You are the nurse. I said Bay 4. I said EKG. Do not diagnose my patients. Do not tell me what to do. Move him. The injustice of the moment hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The other nurses looked down, avoiding eye contact. The residents pretended to be busy with charts. No one challenged Thorne. To challenge Thorne was to invite ridicule, to be labeled difficult, to risk your schedule, your references, your livelihood. Alina felt the heat rise in her cheeks, not from shame, but from the sheer, violent effort of holding herself back. She knew she was right. She knew that if they waited for the EKG, if they waited for the X-ray, the young man would die. But she also knew the chain of command. She knew that insubordination was a fireable offense. So she did what she always did. She nodded. Yes, doctor, she said. She helped the paramedics move the gurney to Bay 4. But as she wheeled him in, she did something small, something insignificant. She adjusted the oxygen mask, ensuring it was sealed tight. She placed her hand on his wrist, feeling the pulse, counting the seconds. And she whispered to the patient so softly that no one else could hear, "Stay with me. I'm watching you." It was a promise, and Alina Vance never broke a promise. The tension in the room is escalating. If you feel the frustration of Alina's situation, please leave a comment below telling us what you would do in her position. Your insights help shape our community discussion. For the next 20 minutes, Alina watched. She documented the vital signs, which were deteriorating rapidly. The blood pressure dropped to 70/40. The heart rate climbed to 140. The young man's consciousness faded. He began to confuse words, mumbling about his mother, about the gym, about the light. Thorne came in briefly, glanced at the monitor, and frowned. Still unstable, he muttered. Maybe it's a PE, pulmonary embolism. Order a CT scan. Call radiology. Alina stood by the door, her hands clasped behind her back to stop them from shaking. A CT scan required transport. It required moving an unstable patient through the hospital corridors. It required time they did not have. "Doctor," she said again, stepping into the bay. "He's crashing. Look at his trachea. It's deviating to the right." Thorne spun around, his face red with anger. "Are you questioning my clinical judgment again, Vance? I have been doing this for 15 years. You have been wiping bottoms for 5. Know your place." The words were sharp, cruel, designed to cut. And they did. They cut deep, reopening old wounds of inadequacy, of being told she was not enough, of being told she was ordinary. But beneath the pain, something else stirred. A cold, hard clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you realize that rules no longer apply. When you realize that the only thing that matters is the life in front of you. Alina looked at Thorne. She did not blink. She did not look away. For the first time in 5 years, she held his gaze. "I am not questioning your judgment, doctor," she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming steel. "I am stating a fact. His trachea is deviated. His breath sounds are absent. He has a tension pneumothorax. If you send him to CT, he will die on the table. If you let me decompress his chest now, he might live." The silence in the bay was absolute. The monitors beeped a frantic, rhythmic warning. Thorne opened his mouth to shout, to fire her, to throw her out. But before he could speak, the young man's monitor screamed. A flatline tone, long and piercing, cardiac arrest. Thorne froze, the arrogance drained from his face, replaced by panic. "Code Blue," he yelled. "Get the crash cart, start compressions." The room erupted into chaos. Nurses rushed in. The resident began chest compressions, pounding on the young man's sternum with desperate force. Thorne grabbed the defibrillator pads, his hands shaking. "Charge to 200, he shouted. Alina stood back, watching. She saw the futility of it. Compressions would not fix a collapsed lung. Defibrillation would not restart a heart that was being crushed by pressure. They were treating the symptom, not the cause, and she knew with terrifying certainty that they were killing him. This is the turning point, the moment where training overrides hierarchy. If you are on the edge of your seat, please share this video with a friend who appreciates high-stakes drama. Stories like this deserve to be heard. "Stop," Alina said. It was not a shout. It was a command. Quiet, authoritative, undeniable. Thorne looked up, sweat beading on his forehead. "What did you say?" he snapped. "I said stop compressions," Alina said, stepping forward. She moved with a speed that blurred. She pushed the resident aside, not roughly, but with an inevitability that brooked no argument. She reached for the supply cart. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't look for approval. She grabbed a large-bore needle, a syringe, and a sterile drape. "He has a tension pneumo," she said, her voice calm, clinical, detached. "Compressions are ineffective. We need to relieve the pressure." Thorne stared at her, stunned by her audacity. "You can't do that," he stammered. "That's a physician's procedure. You're a nurse. If you touch him, I will sue you. I will have your license." Alina ignored him. She placed her hand on the young man's chest, finding the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. Her fingers were steady. Her breathing was slow. She cleaned the site with alcohol, the smell sharp and antiseptic. "Hold the bag," she said to the respiratory therapist, who stood frozen in shock. "Now." The therapist hesitated, then obeyed. There was something in Alina's presence, a gravity that pulled compliance from the room. It was the aura of competence, of absolute knowledge. Thorne watched, paralyzed by indecision. He wanted to stop her. He wanted to assert his authority. But he also wanted the patient to live. And deep down, in the recesses of his arrogant mind, he suspected she was right. Alina inserted the needle. It slid through the skin, through the muscle, through the pleura. There was a hiss, a long, escaping sigh of air. The sound was beautiful. It was the sound of life returning. The monitor, which had been screaming its flatline warning, suddenly flickered. A beat, then another, sinus rhythm. The young man's chest rose, a deep, ragged breath. Color returned to his lips. The room exhaled. The nurses stared at Alina, their eyes wide with disbelief. The resident lowered his hands, trembling. Thorne stood still, his face a mask of confusion and rage. He had been wrong, spectacularly, dangerously wrong. And a nurse, a bottom feeder in his hierarchy, had saved the patient while he had failed. The injustice of his error was compounded by the perfection of her correction. He could not forgive her for saving the life. He could only hate her for exposing his incompetence. The immediate crisis is resolved, but the fallout is just beginning. Before we see how Dr. Thorne reacts, please take a second to like this video. It supports the creators who bring these intense narratives to life. Alina stepped back. She disposed of the needle in the sharps container. She checked the patient's vitals again, stable, improving. She turned to Thorne. "He needs a chest tube," she said quietly, "and a CT scan to rule out other injuries, but he's stable now." Thorne did not thank her. He did not acknowledge her skill. He straightened his white coat, regaining his composure like an actor putting on a mask. "Get out," he said. His voice was low, trembling with suppressed fury. "Get out of this bay." Go back to triage. Do not enter a treatment room again without my explicit permission. Alina looked at him. She saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of being exposed, the fear of losing control. She nodded. Yes, doctor, she said. She walked out of the bay, past the staring nurses, past the whispering residents. She returned to her station at the front desk. She picked up her pen. She continued to fill out forms. Her hands did not shake. Her heart did not race. She had done her job. She had saved a life, and she knew, with a sinking feeling in her gut, that it would cost her everything. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of muted tension. Thorne avoided her. He spoke to the other nurses, giving them instructions, laughing at their jokes, pretending that the incident in Bay 4 had never happened. But the atmosphere had changed. The staff knew. They had seen it. They had seen the nurse become the savior and the doctor become the obstacle. Whispers circulated in the break room. Did you see that? She just stuck a needle in his chest. Thorne was going to let him die. Alina heard none of it. She kept her head down. She focused on the next patient, an elderly woman with a hip fracture, a child with a fever, a drunk with a laceration. She treated them all with the same gentle precision, but she could feel the eyes on her. The respect was there, yes, but so was the fear of Thorne's retribution, fear of being associated with the rebel. Alina was alone, and she knew it. At 7 in the morning, the day shift arrived. The sun rose over the city, casting long, golden shadows across the parking lot. Alina clocked out. Her body ached. Her mind was exhausted. She walked to her car, a battered sedan that had seen better days. She sat in the driver's seat and closed her eyes. She thought about the young man in Bay 4. She thought about his mother, who would arrive soon, crying with relief. She thought about Thorne, who was probably already drafting a report to frame her actions as reckless endangerment. She started the car. She drove home. She did not cry. She did not rage. She prepared, because she knew that the battle was not over. It had only just begun. Alina has saved the patient, but at what cost? The administrative machinery is about to turn against her. If you want to see how she handles the injustice, make sure you are subscribed. We are nearing the climax of part 1. The next day, the summons came. It was not a phone call. It was a formal letter slipped under her door by HR. Mandatory meeting, conference room B200 p.m. Alina read it twice. She folded it neatly and placed it in her pocket. She went to work. She performed her duties. She smiled at patients. She answered questions, but inside she was steel. At 1:55 p.m., she walked to conference room B. The room was small, windowless, and cold. Sitting at the table were Dr. Thorne, the hospital administrator, a woman named Linda Graves, and the head of nursing, a man named Robert Cole. Thorne looked smug. He had a folder in front of him. Linda Graves looked tired. Robert Cole looked uncomfortable. Alina sat down. She did not speak. "Ms. Vance," Linda Graves began, her voice devoid of warmth. "We have received a serious complaint from Dr. Thorne regarding your conduct during the Code Blue last night. He alleges that you performed an unauthorized medical procedure, endangered a patient, and insubordinately disobeyed a direct order from the attending physician." Alina listened. She did not interrupt. Dr. Thorne stated that the patient was stable enough for transport to CT and that your intervention caused unnecessary trauma and legal liability for the hospital. Alina looked at Thorne. He met her gaze, his eyes cold. "Is this true?" Linda asked. Alina took a breath. "No," she said. "The patient was in cardiac arrest due to a tension pneumothorax. Compressions were ineffective. Needle decompression was the only viable option to restore circulation. I acted to save his life." Thorne laughed. A short, sharp bark. "You are a nurse, Alina. You are not trained to perform surgical interventions. You violated protocol. You played God. And if the patient had suffered a complication, you would have destroyed this hospital's reputation. The gaslighting is intense. They are twisting the truth to protect the powerful. If this makes you angry, you are not alone. Please hit the like button to show your support for truth and justice." Linda Graves sighed. "Alina, we value your service, but we cannot tolerate recklessness. Dr. Thorne is recommending immediate suspension pending an investigation. Given the severity of the allegation and the potential for litigation, we are inclined to agree. We are placing you on unpaid leave, effective immediately. You are to surrender your badge and keys." The words hung in the air. Unpaid leave, suspension, the end of her career at St. Jude S., the end of her stability. Alina looked at Robert Cole. "Robert," she said, "you know me, you know my record. Have I ever been reckless? Have I ever violated protocol?" Robert looked down at the table. "Alina," he said softly, "it's not about your record, it's about the hierarchy. We can't have nurses overriding doctors. It sets a dangerous precedent." "A dangerous precedent?" Alina repeated. "Saving a life is a dangerous precedent." Thorne leaned forward. "You undermine my authority," he hissed, "in front of the staff. In front of the residents. You made me look incompetent. That is unforgivable." Alina stood up. She looked at them all, the administrator who cared only about liability, the nursing head who cared only about order, the doctor who cared only about his ego. "I did not undermine your authority, Dr. Thorne," she said. "I upheld my oath. I served the patient. If that is a crime in this hospital, then I am guilty." She placed her badge on the table. She placed her keys next to it. "I will leave," she said. "But know this, the patient is alive because I acted, not because you allowed it, because I acted." She turned and walked out of the room. She did not look back. She walked through the corridors of St. Jude's, past the nurses who looked away, past the doctors who whispered. She walked out the automatic doors into the bright, indifferent sunlight. She was unemployed. She was disgraced. She was ordinary, or so they thought. Alina has been cast out. The villains seem to have won. But we know there is more to her story. Stay tuned for part 2, where the truth comes to light. If you haven't already, subscribe now so you don't miss the vindication. As she walked to her car, Alina's phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. "I saw what happened. Meet me at the coffee shop on 4th and Main, 1 hour. Come alone." Alina stared at the screen. Who was this? A colleague, a witness, or a trap? She hesitated. Then she typed a single word. "Okay." She started the car. She drove to the coffee shop. She sat in the back corner, watching the door. She waited. And as she waited, she thought about the gap in her resume. The 3 years. The field hospital. The promises she had made. She thought about the young man in Bay 4. She hoped he was okay. She hoped his mother was holding his hand. She hoped that somewhere in the universe justice was real. Because if it wasn't, then she had lost everything for nothing. And Alina Vance did not believe in nothing. She believed in action. She believed in competence. And she believed that the truth, no matter how buried, always finds a way to surface. The door to the coffee shop opened. A figure entered, tall, dressed in a suit, carrying a briefcase. Alina's heart skipped a beat. She recognized him, not from the hospital, from somewhere else, somewhere far away, somewhere dark. The figure scanned the room. His eyes landed on Alina. He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. He walked toward her. And as he approached, Alina realized that her past had not stayed in the past. It had come to find her, and it had brought friends. The man who sat down opposite Alina Vance was not someone she expected to see in a downtown coffee shop in Chicago. He was older now, his hair grayer, his face lined with the weathering of high-stakes decisions and long nights, but his eyes were the same. Sharp, assessing, unforgiving. Colonel James Sterling, retired, former Chief of Medical Operations for the International Peacekeeping Corps. The man who had run the field hospital in the Kandahar province where Alina had spent 3 years of her life, the man who had taught her how to triage under fire, the man who had saved her life when a mortar shell had collapsed the triage tent. Alina stared at him, her coffee forgotten, her hands clenched in her lap. "Colonel," she whispered. The title felt strange in this civilian setting, out of place among the latte art and soft jazz. Sterling nodded. "Alina," he said. His voice was gravel, warm but heavy. "You look tired." Alina managed a weak smile. "It's been a long week." Sterling placed his briefcase on the table. He did not open it. He looked at her, really looked at her with the intensity of a commander evaluating a soldier after a battle. "I heard about St. Jude's," he said. "News travels fast in certain circles, especially when a nurse performs a needle decompression on a cardiac arrest patient and gets fired for it." Alina flinched. "How did you hear?" Sterling shrugged. "I have contacts, former medics, nurses, doctors who moved back to the States. Someone saw the incident report. Someone knew your name, and someone knew mine." He leaned forward. "Why are you here, Alina? Why did you let them push you around? You are not the woman I trained. You are not the woman who held an artery clamp for 6 hours while we waited for evacuation. You are a warrior, and warriors do not let bureaucrats strip them of their dignity without a fight." The arrival of Colonel Sterling changes everything. The stakes are rising. If you are captivated by this reunion, please hit the like button. It helps us reach more viewers who love stories of redemption. Alina looked down at her hands. "I wanted a normal life, James," she said, using his first name for the first time in years. "I wanted to be invisible. I wanted to heal people without the noise, without the politics, without the blood. I thought if I kept my head down, if I followed the rules, I could be safe." Sterling shook his head. "There is no safety in silence, Alina. There is only complicity. By letting them silence you, you allowed them to continue their incompetence. You allowed them to believe that hierarchy is more important than life. That is not the code we lived by." Alina felt a tear slide down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "I'm fired. I'm blacklisted. I have no power." Sterling smiled. It was a predatory smile. "You have something better than power," he said. "You have the truth, and you have me." He opened the briefcase. Inside were not weapons, but documents, files, photographs, records. St. Jude's is not just a hospital, Alina. It is part of a larger network, a network that values profit over patient care. Dr. Thorne is not just an arrogant doctor. He is a symptom of a disease, and I intend to cure it. Alina looked at the files. She saw names, dates, incidents, other patients who had been harmed by negligence, other nurses who had been silenced, other doctors who had been protected. "What is this?" she asked. "Evidence," Sterling said. "I have been investigating St. Jude's for 6 months, on behalf of a family who lost their son due to similar negligence. We were looking for a witness, someone on the inside, someone with credibility, someone with skill. We found you." The plot thickens. This is not just about Alina, it's about systemic corruption. If you want to see how they take down the system, make sure you are subscribed. The climax is approaching. Alina felt a surge of energy, a spark igniting in her chest. She was not alone, she was not crazy, she was not wrong, she was part of something bigger. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Sterling closed the briefcase. "I need you to come back," he said. "Not as an employee, as a consultant, as an expert witness. We have a meeting with the hospital board tomorrow morning. The chairman of the board is a man named Arthur Pendleton. He is a former military judge. He respects chain of command, he respects competence, and he hates liars. I have arranged for you to speak, but you must be ready, you must be precise, you must be undeniable." Alina nodded. The fear was gone, replaced by purpose. "I'm ready," she said. Sterling stood up. "Good, wear your uniform, not the scrubs, the one you wore in Kandahar, the one with the medals. Let them see who you really are." He left the coffee shop, leaving Alina with the briefcase and a new mission. She drove home. She opened her closet. In the back, wrapped in plastic, was her old uniform. The desert camouflage, the patches, the insignia, she put it on. It fit perfectly. She looked in the mirror. She did not see a tired nurse. She saw a soldier, she saw a healer, she saw a force of nature. And tomorrow, St. Jude's would meet her. The next morning, the boardroom of St. Jude's Metropolitan Hospital was a temple of glass and steel. The view overlooked the city, a panorama of power and wealth. Around the long mahogany table sat the hospital board. Arthur Pendleton, the chairman, sat at the head. He was 70. With a face like granite and eyes that missed nothing. To his right sat Linda Graves, the administrator. To his left sat Dr. Thorne, looking nervous but confident. He had prepared a speech. He had prepared a defense. He believed he had won. Alina entered the room. She did not wear scrubs. She wore her uniform. The medals on her chest caught the light. The Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the Commendation Medal for Valor. The room went silent. Thorne's jaw dropped. Linda Graves blinked in confusion. Pendleton stood up. He did not smile. He saluted. A crisp, respectful military salute. Alina returned it. "Ms. Vance," Pendleton said, "please sit." Alina sat. She placed the briefcase on the table. "Colonel Sterling informs me that you have information regarding the incident on April 12th, Pendleton said, "and regarding the culture of this institution." Alina opened the briefcase. She did not look at Thorne. She looked at Pendleton. "Sir," she said, "on April 12th, I saved a patient's life by performing a needle decompression. Dr. Thorne claims I violated protocol. I claim that protocol failed the patient. But this is not just about one patient. This is about a pattern of negligence that has been ignored for years." She pulled out the files. She slid them across the table. "These are records of 12 other incidents in the past 2 years. Incidents where Dr. Thorne's arrogance led to harm. Incidents where nurses were silenced. Incidents where the hospital chose liability over life. The evidence is laid bare. The confrontation is inevitable. If you are feeling the satisfaction of justice being served, please leave a comment below. Tell us what you think of Thorne's fate." Thorne stood up, his face red. "This is slander," he shouted. "These are fabricated lies. She is a disgraced employee seeking revenge." Pendleton raised a hand. "Sit down, doctor," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a gavel. Thorne sat. Pendleton opened one of the files. He read it. His expression did not change, but his eyes narrowed. "Ms. Vance," he said, "why did you not report this earlier?" "I did," Alina said. "I reported it to head of nursing Robert Cole. I reported it to Administrator Linda Graves. I was told to know my place. I was told that hierarchy is more important than truth, so I waited for someone who would listen. Colonel Sterling listened." Pendleton looked at Linda Graves. "Is this true?" he asked. Linda squirmed. "Arthur, you know how these things are. Nurses exaggerate. Doctors are under pressure. It's complex." "It is not complex," Pendleton said. "It is simple. Did you ignore these reports?" Linda looked down. "I prioritized institutional stability." "You prioritized your job," Pendleton corrected. He turned to Thorne. "And you, doctor, did you knowingly neglect patients to maintain your status?" Thorne stammered. "I made mistakes, but I am a good doctor. I save lives." "You saved none on April 12th, Alina said. Her voice was calm. "I did, and you tried to fire me for it. That is not medicine. That is ego." The walls are closing in on the antagonists. The authority figure is delivering judgment. If you want to see the final verdict, please hit the like button. We are almost there. Pendleton closed the file. He looked at Alina. Ms. Vance, your service record is exemplary. Your actions on April 12th were consistent with advanced trauma life support protocols despite your title. You acted with courage and competence. Dr. Thorne, your actions were negligent and cowardly. Linda Graves, your administration was complicit. He stood up. Effective immediately, Dr. Thorne is terminated. His medical license will be reported to the State Board for review. Linda Graves is suspended pending a full external audit. Robert Cole is relieved of duty. And Ms. Vance, he paused. Ms. Vance, St. Jude's offers you the position of Director of Trauma Services with full authority to rewrite our protocols, to train our staff, to ensure that never happens again. The room was silent. Thorne looked at Alina, his eyes filled with hatred and defeat. He stood up and walked out, his white coat trailing behind him like a shroud. Linda Graves buried her face in her hands. Alina looked at Pendleton. She did not smile. Sir, she said, I accept, but on one condition. Pendleton raised an eyebrow. Name it. I want a public apology, Alina said, to the staff, to the patients, and I want a plaque in the lobby, not for me, for the nurses, for the ones who are invisible, for the ones who hold the line. Pendleton nodded. Done. The victory is sweet, but the emotional resolution is key. If you are moved by Alina's demand for recognition for all nurses, please share this video. Let's spread the message of respect. The aftermath was swift and public. The news spread through the hospital like wildfire. Thorne was escorted out by security. His office was cleared. His name was removed from the roster. The S. Taff gathered in the main atrium. Alina stood on a small stage. She did not wear her uniform. She wore her scrubs, but she stood taller. She spoke to the nurses, to the residents, to the janitors. We are the foundation, she said. We are the ones who see. We are the ones who care. Do not let anyone tell you that you are ordinary. You are extraordinary, and you are seen. The applause was thunderous. It was not just for Alina. It was for themselves, for their dignity, for their worth. Alina looked out at the crowd. She saw the young resident who had performed compressions. He smiled. She saw the respiratory therapist. He nodded. She saw the future. It was brighter. It was fairer. It was just. Weeks later, the young man from Bay 4 visited the hospital. He was healthy. He was smiling. He brought flowers. He found Alina in the new trauma center. Thank you, he said. My mom says you're an angel. Alina smiled. I'm just a nurse, she said, but I'm a nurse who listens. The boy hugged her. And in that hug, Alina felt the weight lift, the weight of the past, the weight of the silence, the weight of the injustice. It was gone, replaced by light. The story concludes with hope and restoration. If this ending warmed your heart, please hit the like button. It tells us that you value stories of integrity. Alina Vance was no longer invisible. She was a leader, a teacher, a hero, but she remained humble. She remained grounded. She remembered the field hospital. She remembered the promises, and she kept them every day, in every decision, in every act of care. She had taken over the emergency room, not with power, but with competence, not with anger, but with love, and in doing so, she had changed everything. The moral of the story is simple. Humility is not weakness. Silence is not agreement. And competence is the ultimate authority. In a world that often rewards noise and ego, be the quiet professional, be the one who knows, be the one who acts. Because when the crisis comes, when the lights go out, when the systems fail, it is not the loudest voice that saves the day. It is the steadiest hand. It is the clearest mind. It is the heart that serves. As we reflect on Alina's journey, consider the unsung heroes in your own life. The teachers, the nurses, the workers who keep the world running. If you have a story to share, please comment below. We read every single one. This story is fiction, but the themes are real. Injustice exists. Competence is often overlooked. But justice, when pursued with integrity, is possible. We hope this narrative inspired you. We hope it reminded you of your own worth. And we hope it encouraged you to stand up for what is right, even when it is hard. We have many more stories like this in our playlist. Stories of betrayal, redemption, and triumph. If you enjoyed this one, please watch the next video in the series. It features a teacher who was underestimated until she solved a crisis that baffled the experts. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for joining us on this journey with Alina Vance. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your support. We are grateful for this community. We are grateful for your voices, and we are committed to bringing you more stories that matter. Before you go, please subscribe to the channel. It is free, and it ensures you never miss a story. Join thousands of others who believe in justice, competence, and the power of the human spirit. Click the bell icon to be notified of our latest uploads. Alina's story is a testament to the idea that we are not defined by how others see us, but by how we act. She was seen as ordinary, but she was extraordinary, and so are you. Never forget that. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. And remember, kindness is a strength, competence is a virtue, and truth always wins.